The religious love to claim that atheists and atheist claims can be debunked, but can they? Can they really? And the answer, of course, is no. Not only do they not understand what they're saying, they just don't care. They just really want to believe. So let's look at another example where everything goes entirely wrong. Not that the religious will ever admit to it. So off we go. This is a video by Redeemed Zoomer called All Atheist Arguments, yes, the all is in all caps, answered in 10 minutes. We answer a lot of theist questions for us, and those never go well for the religious, but this is the first video that I've seen, I think, where they try to answer some of our objections in return. And I'll be honest, this is a video where I figured, yeah, this is going to be 2 videos. Then I started working on it and said, yeah, this is going to be 3 videos. No, it's going to be more than that, because there's just so much wrong packed in here that it's going to take me forever to unpack it. This is a primer on what not to do as a theist. Will it be any good? I don't know, but I wouldn't be betting on it. But I am willing to take a look. How much of this is going to be misrepresentations of what we say? Probably a lot, but let's get into it and see.
Atheists have a lot of arguments, but they never really think of anything new that the church hasn't had answers to for the past 2,000 years.
That's you, actually. You haven't had a new argument for your God in, forever. At least, not that I've seen, because I can only report on what I've seen, which is one of the reasons that I keep doing this, just in case they ever come up with something new and interesting. But here's the thing. Just because your church can make up explanations for the problems that your religion has, that doesn't make those explanations true, does it? We've done thousands of these stupid videos around here, and all I've ever seen are excuses and bald rationalizations, never once a legitimate answer to any of the objections that we ever raise. So immediately, based on what he has on his wheel, I think we're just going to be looking at yet another religious troll, but I guess there's value in laughing at that too, so I guess let's keep going.
So let's answer them. Religion causes wars.
Which is demonstrably true. But it's not just religion, of course, that causes wars, but any irrational belief system can and has demonstrably caused wars in the past. When you believe that your imaginary friend gave you the land that some heathen over yonder is sitting on, you're a lot more likely to try and wipe them out because, say it with me now, God is on our side. When you don't think that some magical man in the sky is going to help you win, then you tend to be a little more cautious and you tend to think about it a little more than you might otherwise have done. That doesn't mean that you still won't do something stupid, because there is no end to human stupidity and irrationality, but how many people throughout history have strapped on the armor and rode off into battle because we've got God on our side? So let's get to the misrepresentation where he says, because religion doesn't cause all wars, therefore it doesn't cause any wars. Because that's not how that works.
Well, actually, only 7% of all human wars were caused by religion, and if you remove Islamic wars, that number drops down to 3%.
Not really. He's not answering the question that's actually being asked. He even put it up on screen. Religion causes wars. Didn't say religion causes all wars or religion causes most wars, but it does demonstrably and has throughout history caused wars. He even admits it himself. This is just a straw man, but then again, what can we expect, right? Now, a long time ago, I saw somebody break this down. I don't remember where it was, so I'm just kind of going off memory here, as faulty as that may be. People can correct me down in the comments if you think I've got it wrong and if you have better data than I'm going off of here. But it was said that they were only counting the wars that were caused solely by religion. Not any war in which religion played a part, only the ones where it was the only cause of the war. If they could find any reason at all to dismiss a war caused by religion, then they did it. And that's not really being honest, though, is it? If you look at World War II, there are a lot of causes for World War II, but one of them was that Hitler thought the Jews needed to be wiped out, and in fact, a lot of people needed to be wiped out to make way for his master race. This was a religious belief. It was a Christian belief. They don't want to talk about that, though, so they just sweep it off the table and pretend it wasn't real. But it was.
A lot of evil has been done in the name of religion.
Yep, sure has. Not all evil, but yes, evil has been done in the name of a lot of things, including religion, but the statements that he's putting up are factually true. And then he grabs the goalpost and starts running downfield. He's not responding to the actual statements being asked, he's just making things up in his head, and we see that all the time. They respond to what they think that we're saying, not what we're actually saying. They want to dismiss it so badly that they just ignore what is actually being said in favor of the straw man version that they invent in their heads. And you will see this from the religious all the time. I mean, seriously, go watch The Line or The Atheist Experience sometime, where the religious will refuse to answer the questions being asked because the questions being asked will make them doubt their religion. So they answer other questions that they think can skirt around the actual problem, because these are not honest people. They never have been, and they never will be. These people just want to believe. So this is demonstrably true no matter what he wants to believe. Let's see how he screws it up.
This is true, but the most murderous people in human history have been atheists.
Which is irrelevant. There go those goalposts again. Because that's not even true as stated. Hitler was not an atheist. Hitler was a Catholic, and he said so repeatedly. There is nowhere in any of Hitler's writings where he said that he didn't believe in God, and tons of places that he did. This is just a desperate attempt to kick Hitler off of their team because it makes them look bad. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. The Holocaust was caused by Hitler's devout Christianity. Now, can we say that those beliefs are out of the mainstream? Certainly, but there are 45,000 distinct sects of Christianity out there, and beliefs don't cease to be Christian just because you don't agree with them. For people like Stalin and Pol Pot, they didn't act out of atheism, since it's impossible to act out of atheism for anything. They acted because of communism, which is a political ideology that has nothing at all to do with atheism. Secular isn't atheist. Atheism is the answer to one and only one question. Do you believe in any gods? You can derive absolutely no positions from that answer. So he's just wrong again.
This doesn't mean religion is true, it just means you can't use that as an argument against it.
Sure we can. Of course, I don't see anyone actually using these things. These are just straw men made up by the religious because they're easy to swat away. I'd really love to see a source material for these atheist arguments, because I'm sure he just made most of them up. Or it came from some other religious video or website. I don't know. We've seen that many times before. Where's the evidence that any atheist ever said any of this? Because I don't think he has any.
If you were born somewhere else, you wouldn't be a Christian.
You is not a word. Anyone who uses you as a word is an illiterate idiot. Knock it off. Be isn't a word either, but, same thing applies there. However, this is still absolutely true. Childhood indoctrination is a thing. Societal pressure is a thing. People don't just become Christians out of the blue any more than people become Muslims that way. You have to be taught it, and the various churches have pushed that kind of early childhood indoctrination basically forever. Aristotle said, "Give me the child until he is 7, and I will show you the man." And it works for non-religious things too. But here's the thing. If you put a child into an Islamic country such that they never have any contact with Christian ideas, then those people are not going to become a Christian. They will almost certainly become a Muslim. All of the studies that we have prove this conclusively. So you're just wrong.
Okay, and if you were born somewhere else, you wouldn't be an atheist. Everyone's beliefs are shaped by their context.
So, you're admitting that you're wrong? What is wrong with this guy? How is he answering this at all when he's just admitting that it's true? I've got no clue what his point is, so let's just move on.
How do you know which religion is true?
It's a fair question. The religious, and this goes for more than just Christians, claim that their own religions are true, but how do you actually know it? And better yet, how do you demonstrate it to anyone else? That's the one thing that the religious have never managed to do, right? Faith and fifis don't matter, but it's all they really have to go on. The operative word here is know. How do you know? Not what you believe, not what you have faith in. How do you gain actual knowledge, and how do you demonstrate that you have it? And he won't have an answer for that, will he?
Well, everyone, religious or not, has faith in a certain worldview. It's just that some worldviews are called religions and some are secular.
I don't. I don't have faith in anything, especially not the Hebrews 11:1 version of faith, and I don't have a worldview. A worldview is defined as a particular philosophy of life or conception of the world. But I don't really have that. I put it another way, that a worldview is an artificial overlay that you drape over the world to make it more comfortable for you to live in. And I don't do that at all. I accept reality as it seems to be. I take the evidence into account for everything. I do not engage in anything that looks like religious style faith. I can pick up a rock and examine it. It has weight, it has texture. It is, to the very best of my ability to determine, real. Therefore, as far as I'm concerned, it's real. No worldview involved. There's very little that I have to accept without evidence, except for the assumption that any of it exists in the first place, which we all have to do, religious and otherwise, due to the inability to solve the problem of hard solipsism. That's not an assumption, it's not an assertion, it's a necessity, because without it, no one can do anything else. So you're just wrong again.
But everyone has to ask the question of which worldview best explains the world.
I don't. If you really think about it, this is just projection. I don't remember really hearing about worldviews back in the old days, 30 to 40 years ago. This has really become, here's how we can make atheists look like they're just like us, which is nonsense of the highest order. It's why they start saying that everyone has faith, which he did just a minute ago, but I don't have faith, which is usually their cue to start playing linguistic games and conflating different meanings of words because they can't actually make a concrete, coherent case on their own. Even here, I don't think I qualify. The dictionary definition of faith, and this comes from Oxford, is complete trust or confidence in something or someone. Sorry, but I don't have complete trust in anything or anyone. I apportion some level of trust based on the amount of evidence that I have that said thing is true and no more. That's called skepticism and rationality. I also don't say, well, this is what we know, so it's just got to be true. No, that's not how that works. Everything is provisional. I acknowledge that my current level of information is incomplete and always will be, and that any decisions that I make based on what I currently know is dubious at best. It's provisional. It could change tomorrow if we find other things are true. Of course, I can only operate based on the level of information that I currently have available to me. But I don't insist that it's gotta be true, do I? I acknowledge that it very well could be wrong or could be incomplete. That's life. That's how reality works. It's just the best that I have to work with at the time. So, still wrong. Will this guy ever be right? Let me know what you think down in the comments.
There's no scientific proof that God exists.
That's true. There isn't. This is a legitimate question that I'm sure he's going to screw up really badly because that seems to be what he does. In order to rationally accept that any proposition is true, and that goes for anything, one needs to have evidence to back it up, and the religious have none. They've just got faith in fifis, and whether they like it or not, that doesn't demonstrate that anything, any proposition under the sun, is actually true. Now, I don't know where his quibble is going to be on this. He'll probably just say, I just believe, or something like that, but that doesn't mean anything. You can believe you're a water buffalo for all I care. That doesn't make it true. Or he might quibble on the word proof, which, no, it shouldn't be proof, it should be evidence, but people use the two interchangeably, so I usually just let that slide by. So as long as I can understand what you mean and you're not being a dumbass, I don't really care. Let's see where this one goes.
Well, by definition, science can only prove things inside the natural world, and by definition, God is something outside the natural world.
And where did that definition come from? Because you don't just get to make things up about reality because it makes you feel really good. It's like saying, by definition, unicorns are magical. Okay, so what? Show that unicorns are real and that magic, in fact, exists. You can't do that, so your definition is nonsensical. You don't just get to define your God into existence. Science deals with things that are demonstrably real, and apparently your God doesn't qualify. We have no evidence that there is anything other than the natural world. It doesn't matter if you like that or not, it is still the fact that we currently deal with. This is what we can show, and the showing part is important, is real. If you can show that there is something that exists outside of the natural world, great. Go ahead, show us how you came to that conclusion. Don't assert it, demonstrate it. Show us that you're not just full of crap. Of course, they don't even try to do that because it's all based on blind faith and fee-fees. It is not based on reality. And for anything that is in reality, you gotta base it on reality. Give it a shot.
So science can neither prove nor disprove God.
But by that token, science can neither prove nor disprove magical unicorns either. All you have to do to conveniently get away from science is just make crap up. Is that really what he's suggesting? I don't care what science says. I care what the evidence says. And if you have no evidence to present, then I don't care what you say. My only concern is in getting to reality, however reality happens to be. We only get to reality by examining the evidence from reality, not by just making claims, not by wishes and dreams, not by fee-fees and faith. It's only through the evidence. You have to show your work and be able to demonstrate to others how you rationally reach that conclusion and the actual steps that you took along the way, in a way that they can independently test and confirm that you're not out of your mind, you're just lying to them. And this never ever happens with religion, does it? Not ever.
There's no evidence of anything supernatural.
Which is true. In fact, people can't even define what the supernatural is, only what it isn't. Magic is just the stuff that's not non-magical. What does that tell us? Absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. No, you have to define what these things are entirely separate from other things. What is the supernatural made of? How does it operate? And what mechanisms and methodologies can you use to find out more about the demonstrable supernatural? And the answer, of course, is that they can't. They're not even trying. It's just a word that they use to explain anything that they really want to be true, but which isn't demonstrably so. There's a problem there, but he's not going to acknowledge it. None of them will. So let's watch him run around with a goalpost some more, because that's really all he can do.
Well, that's just not accurate. There are medically documented cases of people with demonic possession speaking in languages they don't know, for example, and people with near-death experiences getting information they never had access to.
And that's not true. There are people who claim that they were possessed by demons, but they can't show that demons are even real. There are people who claim to have had near-death experiences, but they can't show that any of the things that they describe ever happened. These are all just claims. What you want to be true doesn't matter. And I've said this before, but if you actually talk to these people and ask them for details and then try to corroborate those details, you're going to run right into a brick wall. Better yet, ask them, how they know these things. Ask them to validate any of their beliefs. They can't do it. In every single encounter, they're going to tell you a couple of details, a few feelings, a few rationalizations, and then it's straight to, therefore God. How they got from I felt a thing to God, they can't say. They just really want to believe it. And even if it was true that they can speak languages they don't know, which it isn't, or have information they don't have access to, which they don't, that doesn't mean that it came from the supernatural. You have to be able to demonstrate this stuff, and they just can't.
The Bible has contradictions.
Which is demonstrably true. Now, I will say that contradictions don't mean that the Bible or some subset of the Bible can't be true. Contradictions only matter because the religious claim that the Bible is inerrant. Get rid of that, and who cares about the contradictions? This is just the religious creating their own problems, which, honestly, what else is new, right?
Okay, you think you found an apparent contradiction that the church hasn't known about for 2,000 years?
No, it's things that the church has tried to rationalize their way around. They haven't actually made any of it go away. That's kind of a problem. Just because you can make up a set of circumstances in your head that make sense to you because you don't really want there to be contradictions, that doesn't mean that's what actually happened. I've watched Christians completely rewrite parts of the Bible so that they can believe that the contradiction isn't really there. Well, it happened like this, and then they just tell me a story. Well, how the hell do you know that? A contradiction is only not a contradiction if it's not there. Just because you tell yourself a story, that doesn't make it go away. This is why I really want it to be true means nothing. I don't care what you want. You have to be able to demonstrate to me that it actually happened the way that you say that it happened in verifiable reality. Stop making a fool of yourself. You're not doing yourself any favors.
Every apparent contradiction can be explained by understanding just a little bit of theology.
But theology doesn't make it true. Truth is only true because it's actually true. It has evidence to back it up, not your silly stories, not your faith, not your beliefs. Theology is just, here's what I wish was so, but that doesn't make it so. This is the problem with a lot of religious people. They get so buried in their theology that they can't even see the world outside anymore. It's just got to be true because they want it to be true. So it's true, even if it isn't true. Nobody cares about your theology but you. Rent a clue.
The Gospels were anonymous.
Which is true. This is another case where he's going to choose to read the statement in a way that isn't actually what it says. The Gospels are anonymous. 4 words, factually correct on all counts. Now, let's see him run around with the goalposts so he can try to make a good showing for anybody who doesn't want reality to be real. And maybe I'm silly here, but I bet he fails.
Okay, anonymous doesn't mean we have no idea who wrote them.
Yeah, it kinda does. The earliest scraps that we have had no attribution at all. Nowhere in any of them does it say, I, fill in my name, said this stuff. Because all of them were written in Greek, we know that it couldn't have been the people that had their names stapled onto them later, probably by Papias in the 2nd century. And no, Matthew wasn't written in Hebrew like a lot of Christians would like to believe. Therefore, the idea that illiterate fishermen and the like could have written in a language that wasn't even commonly spoken where they were, that's just absurd. It's a claim not remotely demonstrated.
It just means the names of the authors aren't signed in the text itself. But we literally have writings from church fathers who knew the apostles and can verify that they indeed wrote the books named after them.
That's the story. Now back it up with more than, he said so. Because that's how pretty much everything in the Bible is. You have to go by church tradition. Well, how do we verify church tradition? We don't. We can't. You just have to have faith that the church knows what they're doing. Yeah, but I have no faith. Sorry. We have no reason to think that these books were written by the apostles, and tons of reasons to think otherwise. Now, granted, he wasn't answering what was said, was he? He never does that. The statement as written is demonstrably true, and he just moved the goalposts to throw in his own personal religious beliefs. And I don't care about any of those. I care about the truth, and he clearly doesn't. This is just laughably absurd. So that's where we're going to leave it for the day. This is going to be a lot longer than I originally thought. At first, this video, which is 9 minutes long, something like that, I figured I'd do it in 3-minute chunks each one. The first video wound up covering 1 minute and 44 seconds of the original, so I think we're in for a long one here, which will make the Supercut fans happy somewhere down the line whenever that shows up. We'll just have to see how it goes. I don't think a lot of these common statements. I think he probably grabbed it all off of a religious website or something, which got it from somebody else back to the point where somebody just made it up or something. But every single statement so far has been factually correct as written. There's nothing actually wrong with any of them. He's just run around with the goalposts on every single one, answering what he wishes was asked, not what was actually asked. The religious do that a lot, don't they? So next time, maybe I can get through another 2-ish minutes of video. I don't know. We'll just have to see how it goes. What do you think so far? Does this redeemed Zoomer guy have any worthwhile points, or is he just an idiot like all the rest? It's clear that he doesn't understand the spirit in which these things may or may not have been asked in the first place. And I don't think he cares either. I don't think any of them care. They're just trying to run back to their faith and their echo chamber, and there's nothing to be proud of in that. So, I guess I'll see you all next time. Hopefully this gets more intelligent. The religious, they don't have a clue, which I guess is fine for them because they don't actually want one. They just really want to believe. But I don't care about their beliefs. I care about the actual, demonstrable, verifiable truth that exists in the world that we all share. And they don't seem to be all that concerned with that, do they? Therefore, they just lie, or maybe they just live in an imaginary happy land in their heads where reality, actual reality, is not allowed to intrude. In either case, this is absolutely nothing that they should be proud of. So let's get back to it. We're back with another couple of questions from Redeemed Zoomer's supposed all atheist arguments answered in 10 minutes. And I'm sorry, but he hasn't answered one yet because he's just using imaginary straw men, but I am willing to give him a chance. Can he come up with any actual questions that real atheists ever ask? Or is it just going to be these silly imaginary things that he or another website or another video just made up in their heads? I don't know. You tell me.
The Gospels misquote Jesus.
I have no idea how this would even be a thing, since we have no evidence that Jesus ever existed at all. How could you possibly know this unless you had another independent source with verifiable Jesus quotes? That's like saying that the Harry Potter books misquoted Voldemort. Well, think about that for the moment. I'm sure you'll get it. Voldemort isn't real. Voldemort never actually said anything. Besides, what atheist has ever said this? Atheists don't care, by and large, we don't care about the Bible. Atheists don't care about Jesus. Again, I think all of this comes from some religious website somewhere where they just make up a bunch of easy softball statements for the religious to take a swing at, and often, like in this case, they just do it badly. I'm pretty sure the Zoomer is going to miss, but I guess we'll see. Maybe he'll provide some context.
Now, it's true that a lot of secular scholars think the Gospels are a mix of real quotes from the historical Jesus and fake quotes added by the church.
I really haven't heard that one either. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people out there, and he's got a picture of Bart Ehrman on screen, maybe to add some air of legitimacy, but I don't think it's really true. Granted, a lot of atheists will accept a historical Jesus for the sake of argument, without any evidence whatsoever to back it up. Just because it's a relatively non-controversial claim, that doesn't make it true. I am interested only in the truth. I don't play the game with the religious that the Bible is automatically reliable just because they really want it to be. It is what they can demonstrate that it is that matters and nothing else. I have no vested interest in having these conversations with the religious like a lot of atheists do. If they have something more intelligent to say, great, fantastic. If they can back up their claims, that's even better. Otherwise, hasta la vista. I got better things to do.
But none of them can agree on which quotes are legit and which are not, so we can discard their opinions.
Just as we can discard yours. In fact, we can discard everything until we have evidence to back something up. That's the whole point. I don't care what you want to believe. I care what you can demonstrate is actually true. And so far, the religious are batting zero. That's the problem. They refuse to come up to our level. I don't see any reason to think that there is, or was, or ever will be a real historical Jesus. And even if there was, we have no way to determine what that real historical Jesus was actually like, because the whole story has been completely mythologized beyond any rational recognition. Was Jesus born in Bethlehem? Who knows? Zero records to support it. The gospel writers were just desperate to put him there because that's how they interpreted the Hebrew scriptures, which I might add was just wrong. Micah 5:2 doesn't say that Jesus will be born in Bethlehem, the city of Bethlehem. It was talking about a group, not a town. But Matthew was so desperate to find anything that was a so-called prophecy in the ancient writings that he just grabbed the first thing he saw, completely misunderstood the context, and just shoved it into his story. And if you look at Matthew, that happens a lot. It's all just BS.
Jesus never claimed to be God.
Like I said for the last one, you have absolutely no verifiable evidence that Jesus ever existed at all. These are just claims by gullible people who really want it to be true. This is like saying that Harry Potter never claimed to be the chosen one. Okay, so what? Because the one thing you will notice with all of these religious videos is that they start with the assumption that all the things that they already believe, well, those are all automatically true, but they can't back any of them up in any demonstrable way. That's why they need faith. It's why once you start asking these probing questions, most of them just freak out and run away because they have no clue what to do once their preconceptions aren't automatically assumed to be true. That's all they're doing. It's why discussions with the religious virtually never go anywhere worthwhile.
Yes, he did. He didn't say, "I am God, worship me," but he showed that he was God in many places in all four Gospels by doing things that only God can do.
And how do you know that? Because again, just asserting things about your imaginary friend, that doesn't make any of it true. This is a massive problem that the religious have, not just Christians, but all religions. They just assert that they know what their gods are like. Well, how do they know that? Demonstrably, I mean. That's the one thing they never have. Well, it says so in my book. Great, then how did the people who wrote your book know that? Again, demonstrably. Because that's a rabbit hole that has no bottom, because it's all claims and no evidence whatsoever. They just want it to be true. This is another thing that is going to make the religious head for the hills, though, isn't it? Because they have no credible answers. They have no evidence-based answers. But what else is new, right?
It's true that he didn't walk around before his resurrection claiming to be God, because he wanted people to figure it out themselves. That's why he kept saying, "Who do you say that I am?"
Well, that's your story anyhow, and this is why they never fare very well. It's all just a bald rationalization. This is what I take from it. But that doesn't make it true. We're here for truth, remember? Your interpretations mean absolutely nothing unless you can demonstrate that there's actual truth behind it. And that's really the problem with Christians in this case, although you can certainly say the same thing about most religions, but your interpretations are going to be different from the interpretations of that guy over there. 45,000 distinct sects, remember? There are no demonstrably true interpretations at all, though, right? The Bible can be read any damn way that you want, and in fact, demonstrably it is. This is not a feature, this is a bug.
However, after his resurrection, people figured out that he was God, and Jesus congratulated them.
According to your book, my book says a thing doesn't matter. How do you know that any of that actually happened without just having faith? Because faith doesn't mean anything. Your wishes and your dreams? Yeah, so what? This is not impressive, and the religious need to get that through their thick skulls. If you are going to assert that you've got a magical guy in the sky and he sent his rape baby to Earth to save humanity from what a dick in the clouds was going to do to them because he's just an asshole, then you'd better have a whole lot more than, but my book says a thing. I mean, at least try.
The later one of the Gospels was written, the more divine it makes Jesus seem, so we can extrapolate that Jesus was originally a human figure who got made more divine over time.
There's a case to be made for that in the Gospels, although Paul, who wrote first, he put Jesus as a cosmic spook, not a real person that walked the earth, so I don't really think that stands up to any kind of rational scrutiny. Because, again, I am not convinced that there ever was a real Jesus, but even if there was, we can know absolutely nothing about what he was actually like, because it's all been buried under massive piles of mythological bullshit. They have to assume these things, but they can't verifiably demonstrate any of it. If they could do that, then we wouldn't need faith, would we? Arguing, my imaginary friend is more real than your imaginary friend, strikes me as a complete waste of time. Come back when you have evidence. Because until then, I'm just going to roll my eyes.
Alright, maybe some Gospels emphasize Jesus' divinity more than others, but what about Paul's letters that fully confess the divinity of Jesus and were also written before any of the Gospels? So that breaks your pattern.
I figured he'd come to the same conclusion, but not for the same reasons. Like I said, I don't think I've ever seen any atheist saying a lot of these things. It comes off as all made up. Granted, I can't say that no one's ever said it because I have no way of knowing that, but these are not at all the common atheist arguments that you tend to see, and he's saying that he's going to handle all atheist arguments, and to be honest, he's running out of time. Maybe he's just saving the actual arguments for the end, I don't know. I guess we can only wait and see.
The Bible supports slavery.
Which it does. There is no way to deny it. God not only says that slavery's okay, he tells the Hebrews where they can get their slaves, how they must treat them, and how they can trick their Hebrew slaves into becoming hereditary property forever. If God can tell the Jews not to wear mixed fabrics, surely he could say, don't own other human beings as property. But no, he doesn't do that, does he? Not ever. Nowhere in the Bible is slavery ever explicitly outlawed. Now, a lot of Christians will say, well, they were just going to do it anyway. Well, what a weak, pathetic God you got there, especially since, as I already said, he outlawed a bunch of other really minor things, apparently successfully. But he couldn't bother addressing keeping slaves. Yeah, fuck your God, and fuck you too for believing in it. But let's see what Zoomer has to say.
No, it doesn't. Just because there's slavery in the Bible doesn't mean the Bible supports it.
Absolutely false. This is yet another problem that the religious have, because God never condemned it before. In fact, the Bible was one of the major supporting documents for both American and British slavery in the 1800s, so apparently they disagree with you. This is all just a bald rationalization. It's people desperate to get around what the Bible actually says to what society supports today. But if the Bible was inspired by God, which a lot of Christians claim, then why does it even tangentially defend slavery by providing rules for keeping people as property? Shouldn't it just say, don't keep slaves. If morality is objective, meaning it never changes, then how the hell do you justify that? This is yet another place where they just run away. I mean, honestly, try it for yourself. It's kind of funny to watch. They're going to make excuses for why they got to be over there someplace. But don't let them try to slip away. Are they saying that Leviticus wasn't inspired by God? When Paul told slaves to obey their masters in Ephesians 6:1, was he not inspired by God? Even Jesus talked about spiritual slavery, and that's still goddamn stupid, isn't it? Yet for all of this, there isn't a single mention in the Bible anywhere where God said that there should be no slaves at all. Justify that. I dare you.
There are some Old Testament verses that could be interpreted as condoning slavery, but Jesus himself said that the Old Testament made accommodations to people's sinful state.
Bullshit. Because God gave people the 10 Commandments.
Hear me! Oh, hear me! All pay heed! The Lord Jehovah, has given unto you these 10 commandments for all to obey.
There are 613 laws in the Old Testament. I guess God couldn't have shoved don't own people as property in there as one of those. I mean, he managed to throw in don't eat the sinew of the thigh in Genesis 32:33, but he couldn't manage don't own people? I mean, how fucking stupid is your God?
And also, slave owners in the American South had slave Bibles for their slaves to read, but it omitted a lot of the real Bible, so if the Bible actually did support slavery, this wouldn't have been necessary.
Yeah, and the parts they left out, those were the parts where people sought freedom. They left in all the stories about Joseph's enslavements, but the part with Moses leading the Israelites out of captivity, yeah, that was omitted because they didn't want to give the slaves any ideas. One of the biggest supports that Christians used during American slavery was the aforementioned Ephesians 6:1. That tells me that this guy is either lying, or he's ignorant, or most likely both, because that's not how history actually worked.
Christianity supported slavery.
Which we've already addressed, so I'm just going to let him get on with it to keep this from getting overly long, which it really already is going to be, but sorry. Anyway, make your point and I'll just rip it apart if I haven't already done so.
Well, sure, some Christians did, but all human civilizations have had slavery. Christian civilization was the first one to abolish it on moral grounds.
Oh, so I guess the idea that God wrote morality on our hearts is just nonsense then, right? If everybody else is jumping off a cliff, would you do it too? Yeah, this once again shows why Christianity is such a joke. You've got Christians on one side using Christianity in the Bible to justify an action, when you've also got Christians on the other side using Christianity and the Bible to condemn that exact same action. It's not just slavery that has that problem, though, does it? When women wanted the vote, who opposed it? Christians. When gay people wanted to get married, who opposed it? Christians. It's Christians who are the dicks here, not everybody else. Always have been, and they always will be, at least until they go extinct, which really can't happen too soon. Everywhere that it is possible to be on the wrong side of history, you find Christians there demanding that God hates progress. Now, there are other things that we can say here, of course, but that's really off topic, so we're just going to leave that one alone for now.
The fact that you're against slavery is due to Christian influence.
Nope. It's because secularism rose and made human equality a thing. You can go out there right now and find Christian groups that are today pro-slavery. You can go out there right now and find Christian groups that are anti-equality. Pretty much every racist group out there is Christian in origin. Now, that's not just Christianity, because the Muslims are terrible at this too, but if you want to find hate, you just have to go and look at religion. Just about all of the hate-filled bigots out there are religious. Not all of them, of course, but the vast majority. That kind of says something about your beliefs, doesn't it?
Also, most organizations fighting modern-day slavery are Christian.
Nope. So let's look at some, shall we? Anti-Slavery International. It's a group that started in 1839, but the modern version, if you go and look at its website, it says nothing at all about Christianity. Go look at their values page. Zero religion mentioned, period. Or Free the Slaves, an international non-governmental organization and lobby group that was once part of Anti-Slavery International, but now it's just its own thing. No open religion there either that I can see. It was founded based on the research of Kevin Bales and exists to eliminate slavery in places like India, Nepal, Ghana, and the Congo, among others. These are not open Christians pushing an openly Christian message. We can also talk about Hope for Justice, which is not religious, or Stop the Traffic with a K, which is non-religious. Hell, there's a list of anti-slavery charities and NGOs, and I can't find anything on there that looks remotely Christian at all. In fact, a couple of them specifically say they are fighting the religious underpinnings of a lot of modern-day slavery. I'll post it all down below if anybody wants to go take a look. You are just wrong.
God killed tons of people in the Bible. Well, it's actually way more than that. God numbers everyone's days. He's the giver of life, so he can take it, especially if people sin.
Hey, brought you into this world. I can take you out of it. Yeah, fuck you. This is just abusive, but these are the kind of people that gravitate toward religion. This is not something that you should believe. This just shows that you've got some major problems upstairs. But you've got to remember that a lot of people believe in gods because they are terrified of being abused if they don't, either by other theists or by the gods themselves. If you have to be afraid of your imaginary friend, you are doing something seriously wrong. Just saying.
Atheist countries are more prosperous.
Secular countries, yes. Look at any happiness index, and that is demonstrably true. The ones who are the most miserable are the ones who are the most religious. So let's just look at the bottom 10 on the happiness index. South Sudan. As of 2020, they were 60.5% Christian, 32.9% traditional faiths, 6.2% Muslim, and 0.4% other or none. Next, Yemen. As of 2010, which is the last year I could find data on, it was 99% Muslim. Central African Republic. Now, we've talked about them many times before. In the central, west, and south of the country, it's pretty much all Christian. North, it's pretty much all Muslim. There is an ongoing civil war that's been going since about 2012 between the Christians and the Muslims, where they're just trying to kill each other. Afghanistan, I trust we don't have to talk about that one too much. Somalia, yeah, same thing. Chad, Congo, we can just go down the list. All of them are heavily religious. So what about the most prosperous and happy? Denmark, which according to Gallup in 2017 is 61% non-religious. Sweden, 73% non-religious. Norway, 62% non-religious. Finland, 55% non-religious. Switzerland, there aren't any figures for 2017 that I could find, but in 2015, it was 58% non-religious. That's something else you're going to notice, but the numbers from 2015 to 2017, where we have those numbers, those percentages are only going up. For Denmark, for example, in 2015, it was 52%, and in 2017, it was 61%. This is going on across the board. This is also very, very clear. This guy might be trying to rationalize his way around it, but let's be honest, he's just full of shit.
Yes, it's true that Northern European countries are very prosperous and very secular, but correlation doesn't equal causation. It's not like atheism causes prosperity, it's that prosperity causes atheism because when people have comfortable lives, they don't feel a need to depend on God.
That's true. He actually kind of surprised me there. But here's the other thing. All of those countries have well-educated populaces, whereas the ones where religion is prevalent, They don't. The US is actually an outlier. There is a direct, demonstrable, negative correlation between advanced education and religiosity. The more you know, the less you tend to believe. The better the economy, the less you need a god. That's why religion goes after poor people, right? The uneducated are the only ones dumb enough to actually fall for it. And we've made this point many times before. Now, he's right that correlation is not causation, but it's funny that the only place that he'd admit to that is where it makes his religion look bad, right? Because when you look at the religious talking about prayer, it's always, I prayed, something happened, therefore, God done it. Sorry, don't be a hypocrite. Not only do studies prove that prayer works at a rate no greater than random chance, but just asserting God done it all the time doesn't prove that God done it. That's why I always ask for direct, demonstrable evidence between the cause and the event, because nothing less will do. And that's something they don't have, right?
But why are these particular countries so prosperous in the first place? They may be secular now, but they're rooted in generations and generations of Protestant Christianity.
So, desperately looking for an out, huh? Okay, let's take a case study. Denmark, the highest on the list that we saw before. The reason that they are prosperous today is because they have the largest natural gas and oil reserves in the EU, or at least they've been one of the biggest producers. I don't know, gross if they actually have the largest, but whatever. So it's a relatively modern thing. The problem is we don't have a good gauge on how secular the country was before about 2000 because they weren't doing those studies. We do see a lot of theists claiming credit for things that they had absolutely nothing demonstrably to do with, and that seems to be what's going on here. We laid the foundation doesn't mean anything without demonstrable evidence, and the religious don't seem to have any. So this is just another empty claim among a whole lot of empty claims, and until he can prove that it's actually demonstrably true, we don't have to take you seriously, because we shouldn't. So, with that said, moving on.
If you want an example of a country that's atheist and not rooted in Christianity, look at communist China.
Yup, and they are an economic powerhouse. They're also not really that communist anymore, although they like to play the part, but I guess that's neither here nor there. They are also not in the top 20 happiest nations, at least not on the 2024 report. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're just getting started, and most of the country isn't benefiting from the modern advancements. I figure that's going to change over the next decade or so, but my guesses don't mean any more than his does, so, like I said, moving on. Anyhow, I think we're just going to stop here for the day, although we got through a little bit more than we did the first time. The first video we covered 1:44 of content, and this time we managed 2 minutes and 23 seconds. But this is still going to take a while because it's such concentrated stupid, so I guess what can you expect? So what do you think so far? Let me know down in the comments. So much of this just requires some basic thought, maybe a simple Google search to debunk, and the religious, they don't seem to be really capable of that, do they? They're only reading their own sources because they only care about their own justifications. They only care about their own confirmation bias. They just want to believe it, but wanting to believe it isn't enough. I also don't think that many, if any, actual atheists have ever brought most of this up. I can't say for sure. I don't hear these things very commonly. He's trying to debunk what I think are mostly imaginary nonsense while trying to support his own imaginary nonsense. How's that going for you? Because we see this kind of thing all the time, don't we? Theists saying that they're responding to atheist questions or claims or whatever it is, while not responding to actual atheist questions or claims or whatever, because they can't actually handle what we're really asking. So they just make it up. Or they just go to other religious websites that have just made it up, or they just go to other videos that have just made it up. And I'm not claiming that this guy is a liar himself, although he certainly could be, but they don't tend to ask a lot of questions when it comes to finding video material, do they? I'll just keep going though, because tearing down theist misconceptions is useful, if only to show why they're wrong all the time. But if you have any thoughts on the matter, go ahead and put those down below, because I always find that interesting. So anyway, we'll be back in a week with another batch of nonsense, but what can you expect from the faithful? These people are just not that bright. They've got some serious problems. But debunking that, hey, I have fun with that, so let's do some more. The religious love to try to debunk atheists, but they only manage to make themselves look ridiculous in the attempt. We can't be debunked because we make no claims to debunk. Then again, according to them, everybody has to be just like they are, even though they're not. They're just wrong all the time. So let's watch them keep proving it again and again and again. Welcome back to Reformed Zoomers' claimed answers to all atheist questions, or whatever the hell it is. But it's not actually answers, is it? It's just claims, and empty ones at that. This is just what he really wants to believe, and I think that if you spend any time around the religious, you'll find that's how it works for pretty much all of them. They just have faith, and I'm sorry to say, but your faith doesn't matter. You will never convince them of that, of course, but it remains true nonetheless. So, let's get back to it.
There's 4,000 gods that people believe in, and you're atheist to 3,999 of them. I just go one god further.
Now, I have seen people use that before, but I still think it's dumb because it entirely misunderstands the religious. I've also seen people say, well, once you understand why you reject 3,999 other gods, you'll understand why I reject yours. And no, that's not true. The reason they reject 3,999 or whatever it is other gods isn't because they have rationally evaluated each and every one of them, or even collectively, and come to that conclusion based on the complete lack of evidence to support any of them, that they probably don't exist, or at the very least that there's insufficient evidence to support them. It's because the God that they do believe in says that those others aren't real. There's never been any intellectual thought put into it at all. It's just faith and fifis wrapped up around emotional comfort. And it's still just stupid. So don't use that one. It gets you nowhere and is just false.
Okay, this isn't the gotcha that you think it is, because the question of whether some sort of God exists is fundamentally different from the question of which religion is right about God.
That assumes that any religion is right about God, any God, and that isn't valid until you can show that some religion out there is actually right about their gods. Because again, based on the evidence, which is all that ought to matter, none of them are. The only way to get to right, and by that I mean factually true, evidentially supported, and objectively so in the real world that we all share, is to be able to show that it's actually true. And none of them are even trying to do so, if you notice. And I've made that point a lot. As I've said before, there is no scientific institute for the existence of any God. You only have churches, and churches don't care about evidence. They rely entirely on faith. Just believing in a God, like the little thing down the corner says, doesn't mean that there is a God, any more than believing that you are a magical pink unicorn means that you are. Your beliefs mean absolutely nothing if they're not based on demonstrable evidence. And I wish these people could figure it out.
If God created everything, then who created God?
That's not really the gotcha that people who say that think it might be, especially phrased like that. Of course, it doesn't work for the religious either, which we'll get to in a second. But the religious are relying on some very poor claims to justify their own beliefs. They will claim that something couldn't come from nothing, which absolutely nobody says except for the religious, so it's just a complete straw man. They will say that causality can't go back into the infinite, which again, they're the only ones who say that. The honest fact is, though, we don't know. We can only tell you how our particular instantiation of space-time worked, at least going back to Planck time. Beyond that, we have no clue. And in fact, at least at present, we can have no clue. That's why the religious invented gods in the first place, at least one of many reasons, because they want to know what is, at present, inherently unknowable. Yet wanting to know a thing that you don't know doesn't mean that you know that thing. Let's just get into the religious side of it, though, because that's mostly what I've talked about so far.
Well, God is defined as the uncaused causer.
You don't get to just define reality into existence. You don't get to define real things however you happen to like them. You have to be able to go and look at them to see how they actually are. The second anyone says God by definition, they've lost. They can show no conceivable way how they've come to that definition rationally. It's all just made up. Show me how you or anyone else got to that demonstrably. Because they can't do it. This is just an assertion, not a definition. And that is not remotely impressive.
Everyone knows there needs to be a first cause at the beginning of the chain of all events in the universe.
Do they, though? Because that's not actually how it works. This is just, well, it seems to me, which means absolutely nothing, coupled with, but everybody else is just like I am, which is patently false. That's the problem with living in a religious echo chamber, or any kind of echo chamber at all, where the only voices that you hear are the ones that agree with you, because you won't allow anyone who doesn't already agree with you inside. This is a general assumption that everything that we see today has always been that way because that's what we see today. And that's not how that works. That is not rationally defensible. In fact, I've had creationists tell me that evolution couldn't happen because the Earth couldn't have been any different ever because look out the window. Now that's about as stupid as saying night is imaginary because the sun's right there. Now, that's on a much shorter time scale, granted, but the simple fact is the planet hasn't always looked like it does today. The universe hasn't always looked like it does today. There comes a time where all of our experiences and our assumptions break down because things change. It's not like that. That's not how it works. Deal.
And it makes a lot more sense for that first cause to be a personal God who caused things for a reason, rather than some random impersonal force.
Says who? Oh, I know you want there to be a personal God, but that doesn't mean that one exists. Remember, we're here after actual reality, not just emotionally comforting wishes and dreams. Again, it just makes more sense. It's just, well, it seems to me, and I want it to be that way. But that doesn't mean anything in actual reality. Everyone isn't just like you. In fact, increasingly, people are becoming very different from you, and hopefully that trend continues and religion goes completely extinct. Because wouldn't that be nice?
Science disproves God.
No, it doesn't. Science can't even address gods in that way, and the religious tend to just make them up anyhow. Science also doesn't disprove invisible, intangible, universe-creating pixies. Anybody who uses this one is an idiot. Science doesn't disprove anything. Science only fails to confirm things. It fails to falsify things. Science evaluates evidence and builds models. Those models are always, by necessity, provisional. If we were to find more evidence tomorrow that completely overthrows the current paradigm, things would change, because that's how science works. So, I'm kind of going to agree with him here, at least as far as the words on screen goes. It is a bad argument, often based on ignorance. It's not really even an argument, though, because none of these really are. It's just a statement. So let's see his side of things, which I wager is going to be just as bad.
Well, actually, the church invented modern science.
There you go. In fact, the church had nothing at all to do with it. People did. The people might have been members of the church, they might have been believers in the religion, but correlation is not causation. As time went on, science left the purview of religion and became its own thing. The church fought tooth and nail to rein science in, killing and imprisoning scientists who were showing that reality isn't how the church wanted it portrayed. And I can't think of a single case where science has confirmed the supernatural teachings of any church anywhere at any time. So this is just a nonsensical argument.
All the founders of the scientific revolution deeply believed in God, and medieval theologians laid the groundwork for modern science by saying the world was governed by an intelligent creator. That means we can understand the world with our intelligence, and studying God led to studying the world because the world is God's creation.
That's your claim. Now, I guess it's no surprise that he understands science no better than his supposed atheist strawman version of it, since none of this is stuff that is popular in atheist circles. I mean, I've heard that more times than I'd like to admit, and I've debunked it plenty, but just being an atheist doesn't mean that you have a brain in your head. The people don't matter, only the evidence does. However, whatever that initial state of science was, that has absolutely nothing to do with what science is today. This is, again, just the religious living in the past because they can't handle the present. Today, the overwhelming majority of scientists are atheists, and it's been like that for a very long time. It's time that the religious learn to deal with it and just move on.
God is just used to fill in the gaps of things that science can't explain yet.
That is true, at least in part. However, the religious tend to get emotionally attached to the God idea, and even when science does discover the truth, they are loath to just give up on their imaginary friends and go with reality. And that's not something to be proud of. This is why the whole God of the Gaps thing is so silly, where the religious just stuff their imaginary father figure in the sky into all the gaps in scientific understanding, but those gaps are getting fewer and much farther between every single day. We don't understand everything. We never will, since every question answered poses a dozen more, but we're running out of places for the religious to hide their gods. And I think that's a very good thing. It just makes the religious look desperate, which, let's be honest, they are.
Well, actually, God is the reason for everything, even things that science can explain. It's not one or the other. It's not like everything's explained by either science or God, and the more science can explain, the less God can explain. Really, science can explain almost everything, but God is still behind it all.
That's just your claim, though, and this is a childish claim. But I'm still right! Yeah, that's just an empty assertion, nothing more. It doesn't matter how many times that you claim that your imaginary friend is responsible, because if you can't demonstrate that it's true with objective, verifiable evidence, then you're just yanking the whole thing out of your asshole. This is how the religious tend to work, right? We're right because we say so. But that doesn't mean anything. What you claim without any corroboratory support is irrelevant. Yet the religious, they can't understand that, can they? They don't care. They just really want to believe. Just because you invented a God that lives in your head and is the answer to positively everything according to you, that doesn't make any of it real.
Because science explains the how, and God explains the why.
Says you. You haven't demonstrated that there is a why. You've only claimed it blindly. Again, this is why the religious go so wrong all the time, because they just don't care. I know I keep saying that, but it is actually true. They're after comfort, not fact. So long as their tall tales make them happy, why the hell not, right? You will find theists that are completely fine with that, which I find eminently sad. They know that they're full of crap, but they still embrace it because, I don't know, they like crap, I guess? You like rolling in crap? I don't know, it sounds like a personal problem to me.
If God is good, why can't he destroy all evil?
Well, that's just the problem of evil. Now, I'm sure he's going to throw this off on free will or God has a plan or some stupid crap like that, but that doesn't actually solve anything, does it? Under an omniproperty God, there can be no free will because God has already foreseen everything. even every decision that you will ever make in your life. And if you can't do something God hasn't foreseen, then free will goes completely out the window. Now, I don't really want to get into a free will discussion here because that always turns into, well, it seems to me on all sides, and that's not very productive to begin with, so I'm not going to do that. Now, keep in mind that if God has these omni properties, it isn't that he can't destroy evil, as the question asks, it's that he doesn't want to, because if he wanted to, evil wouldn't exist. And that just makes God a dick.
Well, he eventually will.
Says who? Now, I get that those are your beliefs, but that doesn't demonstrate that your beliefs are true. It's like saying, Harry Potter will eventually destroy Voldemort. Yeah, but that's a fantasy story, and it's not professing anything that's demonstrable in reality. Granted, the Bible is just a fantasy story too, so, yeah.
Why can't he do it now? Because he'd have to destroy you.
Yet God supposedly created me this way, right? Why would God create me in such a way that his only choice would be to destroy me down the line? Because again, your God is a dick. This really gets back to the kind of simplistic thinking that the religious are full of. I can come up with plenty of solutions for how teleological evil could be destroyed, yet not destroy humanity at all. If I can come up with solutions just off the top of my head, then why can't God? Oh, right, because it's all just made up. These are just excuses invented to explain why the universe looks in a certain way that it absolutely should not look like if an all-powerful omniproperty God actually existed. This is just nonsense. Anybody surprised?
Why does God let any bad things happen? Because we deserve it.
Says who? Because again, God supposedly made us this way. God had to know what would happen, and yet did it anyhow. That makes God a dick. Free will can't exist with an omniproperty God. That's why Christians have been trying, unsuccessfully, for many, many years to redefine God so that God isn't the asshole that he would have to be by definition. That's why the Catholics have been pushing some form of Molinism since the Middle Ages. Well, God isn't actually all-knowing. Well, yeah, we've been seeing this for a while now. God isn't actually all-powerful. To get around the problem that God seems bizarre if he can't violate logic, but as an all-powerful God certainly would be able to if he were in fact all-powerful, right? I've made that point many times before. If God wanted to make a married bachelor, then he'd just have to alter the definitions for either married or bachelor, and he could do it. After all, God not only had to make the stuff, but he had to make the concepts of the stuff. An all-powerful God would be able to alter the concepts at will. Then again, lots of people are going to look at that if the religious even tried to make those changes and said, that's dumb. And they're not going to join the cult and they won't give them their money, and that's what they're really after to begin with. We know what this is all about. Sad to see that the religious just can't figure it out.
Well, animals don't sin, so why do they suffer? Well, the Bible says all things will be restored, so if God is good, we can assume that they will be compensated.
That's just a bald rationalization. Can we go to a child that's being beaten daily or sexually abused and say, well, it's okay if you get raped on the regular because someday you're going to get rewarded? Yeah, again, God is a dick. It isn't enough for that to be someday. These are just excuses to wrangle their way around the reality that we actually live in. This is what happens when they have no real answers. They're just backed into a corner and have to come up with an emotionally comforting story to tell themselves so they just don't feel so bad. It's just not consistent with their concept of a God. So, when they have problems, they just change things. But you can't do that with anything that's actually real, because real things are what they are. But the religious don't care, do they? God is just a security blanket, and they can alter it at a whim. It just proves that they don't actually think that God is real, or at least they should understand this. Then again, these people are idiots.
How do you know that God isn't evil instead? Well, because evil is not a thing the way good is. Just like cold is just a lack of heat, and dark is just a lack of light, evil is just a lack of good. And for good to be objective, it needs to come from God. So a God who is objectively evil is logically impossible.
And the bold rationalizations just keep coming. I just let that one play because I had an inkling what he was going to try to pull, and I wasn't wrong. First off, good isn't a thing. Good is a subjective claim about things that we find favorable, just like bad is the stuff we don't like. It's always been that way, and it will always be that way. Here he claims that good is whatever is in accordance with God's nature, but since he can't conceivably know what is in accordance with that nature, because he can't prove that the thing that he's claiming has a nature is actually real, this whole thing is just nonsense. Remember, the religious are just making this stuff up. God is whatever I want God to be. Oh, they'll deny that, of course, but that's demonstrably what's going on. How do we tell? We ask them, how do you know that? Because they have no demonstrable answers. They just want to believe it. Try explaining all the problems to them, and they won't care. Because faith is all they have, and faith is all they want, when they really need to have some brains. And this whole thing is just dumb.
Can God make a rock he can't lift? Well, you're just asking if God can contradict himself, like can God lie, or can God change, or can God make another God?
The answer to all of that has to be yes. Again, this is just a problem with the omni properties, and those are things that the religious just made up to begin with. If the omni properties are true and God can do anything, then God should be able to contradict himself and then just change reality so it isn't a contradiction. Of course, that's just going to make people look at them funny and walk away, which they don't want to happen because they're losing a lot of money, so they just try to rationalize their way around it. How? By claiming that somehow they understand God's nature. And how exactly do they know that? Details, please, because they don't have any. This is where you have to keep putting the pressure on, because eventually they're either going to have to admit that they don't know, or they're going to have to run away, which is the most common. Or in rare cases, they're just going to attack you to shut you up. I've had all three of those things happen. I've had to put people down on the floor because they took a swing at me. This is all just emotional, not remotely intellectual. It's not something that we should really be surprised by, but there you go.
And the answer to all those things is no. God being all-powerful means he can do anything to things outside himself. It doesn't mean that he can do anything to himself or that he can contradict himself.
How do you know that? Because I've already dreamed up scenarios where he certainly should be able to, given the made-up characteristics that you people have just randomly stapled onto him. Yet here he is, confidently stating things that he has absolutely no way that he can conceivably know just because he really wants it to be true. Don't let them get away with it. How do you know that is a powerful tool? Anytime they start yanking claims out of their asses, which should start about 10 seconds after they begin talking about their imaginary friends, start asking them to intellectually justify their claims. How do they know the things that they claim to know? How do they back them up? Because as soon as you do that, you find out that their answers are not pretty. Be ready for some self-defense if you're doing this face-to-face.
Why did God let evil exist at all? So he could be glorified in defeating it.
So your God is still a dick. It always comes right back to this, right? If your God is all-powerful and all that, then why should he care about being glorified? If he needs worship, then he's not self-sufficient, is he? There goes perfection. You can't just let up. Eventually, probably, they're just going to say, but I have faith, and that's just an admission of loss. Anyone can have faith in anything. I can proclaim faith in invisible, intangible, universe-creating pixies. They told me that the Christian God isn't real, don't you know? So how do I know that? Because they told me. parrot back the stupidity that they've been spouting all along and watch how they react. Because they don't react well. It's embarrassing, but then again, belief in gods is inherently embarrassing to begin with, right?
Triumph over evil is a greater good than evil having just never existed.
Says who? This is only the case if you have an ego on overdrive, which is no surprise since God was invented by humans with egos on overdrive. If you just want your creation to be happy, then why in the world would you throw obstacles in their path that doesn't demonstrably improve the situation? This just makes you a dick, which, as we all know, the Christian God absolutely is one, if he is at all like Christians portray. Zoomer, of course, would never agree, but why would you care what the terminally delusional have to say? I mean, seriously, go watch this guy's social media accounts, because he is a fucking freak. I know I don't do that very often because, holy shit, I got no time for that, but it is fun to just laugh at these buffoons, isn't it?
Religion is just wishful thinking. Well, if that were true, then the Bible wouldn't be all about how much we all suck.
Absolutely it would. These ancient tribal religions have always been about how much people suck. Remember, Yahweh started off as a Midianite tribal god that the early Hebrews borrowed with some massive air quotes. Huge parts of the Old Testament are God making fools of the gods of other people and the people themselves. Well, my God made your gods. Yep, sure, okay, whatever. But that kind of plays into what he said in the last question. If God supposedly made everything, then how do we explain the priests in Exodus 7 who did all the magic? Modern Christians just rationalize that it was demons or devils or something stupid like that, but clearly it was intended to show that Yahweh was more powerful than the other gods of the surrounding peoples, and thus followers of those gods suck. Then, once this became all about control, which is all religion ultimately is, and of course the clergy class started pushing, well, you people suck, so that they'd have to come crawling to the priesthood for forgiveness, and to hand over their money because the priesthood doesn't want to work. Can't forget about that. This just shows how little understanding Zoomer and people like him actually have. As if that's any surprise. And that's where we're going to cut it for the week. Honestly, does he think he's actually answering anything here? He's just making claims and proclaiming faith, but he's not actually addressing anything that actual atheists say, nor would his answers convince anybody that he's right. This is just faith in fifis once again, which is hardly a surprise. This is just wishful thinking, and Redeemed Zoomer is an idiot. And that's why he's getting trashed, not only in downvotes, but in the comments on his video. Keep in mind, this is a big channel for some bizarre reason, and he's still getting his ass handed to him. Not that I suspect he cares or anything because, religion. So we'll be back next week, and I'd like to think that we're going to finish this up, but I can't promise anything. It looks like we will, but I don't want to make promises I can't keep. This time we managed to get through 2 minutes and 33 seconds worth of his content, and we still have 2 minutes of 24 seconds remaining. So I guess it all depends on just how much criticism I have to apply to his silly answers. I'm hoping. Keep your fingers crossed. Not that that means anything, but I'll try. His answers are just stupid. They're not really answers. They're just excuses. He's got no means whatsoever to demonstrate that anything that he actually says is true. But since when did truth mean anything to a theist? Never. Not ever. Not once. Can we be debunked? Well, I don't see how, since atheism makes no positive claims, but the religious seem to think that they can debunk us, so I'm happy to give them a shot. It's too bad that they're always so bad at it, and this time will be no different. So let's get right back to it. One last time, I'm serious. Getting through this one video has been a challenge because there's just so much concentrated dumb that it all drags on while I have to explain just how dumb it actually is. I'm going to get through the end of this if it kills me, and it might. But no matter what, we're going to be finished with Redeemed Zoomer and his bald rationalizations and religious bullshit this time. He hasn't answered any atheist objections, at least not so far. We don't know what he's going to do this time, but I wouldn't be holding my breath. Instead, he's just offered excuses, which is all the religious can do. So let's get back to it and wrap this up once and for all. Because I don't know about you, but this guy's a moron.
Psychology explains why you believe in God.
To some degree, sure, because psychology explains why we do most things. That's not really an objection to Christianity specifically, but this guy's been all over the map since the start, so sure, why not? Go ahead and make your case, and we'll see if it's at all worthwhile. Let me throw out a prediction right here, not having seen the answer yet. It's going to be some variation of, nuh-uh. Let's see if I'm right.
So what? If God is real, we should expect there to be some psychological or social benefit to believing in him.
But it has nothing at all to do with God being real. Guess what? Hindus derive a psychological benefit from believing in Krishna or other Hindu deities. Same with Muslims and Allah. Are you going to say that that makes those gods real? Or are you just going to ignore the problems with your statement? Notice, he's still playing the if and because game. Virtually all of them do that at this point. They can't show that their gods are real. So they suggest if, when they really mean, well, of course God is real, it's obvious. Yeah, obvious only to you and the other idiots on your side because that's what you want to be true. The rest of us are still waiting for you and your side to make your case and present your evidence. And you're not very good at that, are you?
Spiritual experiences can be explained by brain chemicals.
Indeed they can. In fact, we have devices that can cause you to have them at will. This is well understood in medical circles, but the religious have no interest in the actual reality behind their beliefs. I have had people absolutely deny that the God helmet even exists, even when being shown studies on its effects. Well, it can't be true because my experiences feel so real. Yeah, you're a moron. So let's get back to the other moron and see his rebuttal.
Well, romantic experiences can also be explained by brain chemicals, but that doesn't mean your wife isn't real. So spiritual experiences being explained by brain chemicals doesn't mean that God isn't real.
That's true, but I do have independent and demonstrable evidence for my wife, and you have nothing at all for your God. See, you're not actually answering anything. You're just throwing out snarky comments as a distraction. And you'll see a lot of theists pulling that one. They will claim things like religious experiences exist, and then when we point out that they're just your brain doing what your brain does, and there are perfectly good natural explanations, no gods required, they'll get snarky and say, oh yeah? And go off on some tangent that isn't actually addressing the point being made. I know that my love for my wife is just an electrochemical reaction in my brain. I'm not pretending otherwise. I have evidence that she exists. She was real before I ever loved her. She was real before I ever knew her. The religious can offer absolutely nothing for the existence of their gods. And that's the part they won't address.
Well, drug trips show that spiritual experiences are from the brain.
That is also true. I mean, stupid, but true. When you screw up your brain chemistry, you see bizarre things. That's why drugs are a part of a lot of religious rituals. Now, you don't need drugs. You can do the same thing with eating the wrong foods or not eating them. Fasting can cause hallucinations. So can anxiety or depression. In fact, in 2007, a study found that religious delusions of this kind are strongly correlated with temporolimbic overactivity, which is a condition where irregularities in the brain's limbic system may present as symptoms similar to paranoid schizophrenia. So people who see demons and devils all over the place, it's probably a medical problem, not a psychological one. And that's just what I'm going to throw out there. So let's see what Zoomer has to say.
Well, people who have had both drug trips and near-death experiences say that they're completely different categories of feeling.
Which changes absolutely nothing. It's all still stuff that's happening in your brain. In fact, we can test to see what's going on, and we have. This is why the religious are only claiming subjective experiences, not objective evidence, because they don't actually care about the objective reality or what's really going on. It's just how it feels. Who cares? How it feels is absolutely irrelevant. What matters is what's really going on, and they are not remotely concerned with any of that. This is why taking any of this seriously is pointless. It's talking to immature children who are only looking at being happy and not being rationally correct. I don't care about what insane interpretations you can yank out of your ass. That is not the reality. The reality is something that you can demonstrate with objective evidence is actually going on. And whether you like it or not, only the reality matters.
The story of Jesus was copied from the story of Horus or some other ancient character.
Not really. Certainly there are elements in common because they all came from a specific area and, people talk. But it isn't a direct one-to-one correlation, and you shouldn't be saying that it is. However, the religious also can't ignore the similarities because dying and rising messiahs were really common back in the day. Everybody was making up their own stories about their own gods, and the Jews, they were no different. Just because they really want it to be true, that doesn't make it true. And that's something that they really need to get through their heads. But let's see how Zoomer responds.
Okay, dude, that's a Reddit atheist-level myth. Even atheist scholars know that that's silly.
So, no response, just dismissal. Even for this guy, I kind of expected better. You will see this kind of thing a lot, though, because they'd rather just dismiss it without having a conversation, because it gets into some really potentially dangerous territory, doesn't it? I think the reason they do it is because they don't want their followers to realize just how common this trope was. Osiris, Horus, Buddha, Krishna, Zarathustra, Hercules, Mithra, Dionysus, Thammuz, Hermes, Adonis. If more Christians understood that this was just that common in that part of the world at that time, they might start asking some really uncomfortable questions. And if the religious can't answer those questions, things are not going to go well for them. So they try to do anything they can to avoid it. I don't think this is an especially honest way to handle things, but then again, look who we're talking about.
Faith is the opposite of logic and reason.
Absolutely it is. Faith, to use Matt Dillahunty's go-to definition, is the excuse that people give themselves for believing things that they cannot demonstrate are actually true. Faith is emotional. Fact is not. When the religious, or anyone else, appeals to faith, they are just admitting that they don't have a good, reasonable, rational, evidence-based reason to believe any of it is true. Otherwise, they just present the evidence and leave the faith behind. Faith is not a virtue. The religious really need to figure that out.
No, it's not. Faith just means trust.
No, it doesn't. Hebrews 11:1, which is the only place in the entire Bible that defines specifically what faith is, says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." There's no mention of trust whatsoever. Trust in what? something that you can't demonstrate exists in the first place? Then how is that trust justified? Ask the religious these questions and they'll back off quickly because they have no answers. They can no more claim trust in God than I can claim trust in invisible, intangible, universe-creating pixies. If your faith isn't well placed in something that is demonstrably real, then how can you reasonably have any trust? They don't have an answer for that, do they? They just really want to believe it.
Anytime you eat food, you're having faith that it's not poisoned, even if you can't scientifically prove it.
Wrong. I know there is food there. I can see it. I can touch it. I can taste it. I can test for it. I don't need faith in the food. I can have prior experience. My wife and I went out to eat last night at a really good local pizza place. We eat there all the time. We walk in, they know exactly what we want, and they don't even bring us menus. They just sit us down, walk away, bring us our food because we order the same thing every single time. We just sit down, and here comes our food. Do I trust them? Yes, because I know them. I'm actually friends with half the people who work there. I can absolutely prove that they are real, that their food is real, and I have a long-standing personal experience with the food. Is it remotely possible that one of them might go crazy and try to poison me? Maybe. I could see that, maybe. I don't know. But that would be an outlier to all the evidence that I have, whereas the religious have no evidence whatsoever for their imaginary friends. So, no, this is just stupid.
If you're married, you have faith that your wife loves you, even if you can't scientifically prove that.
Except I could if I wanted to. We've talked about fMRIs before, so we don't have to go into all that again, because love is just an electrochemical reaction in the brain. I could test it if I wanted to, even though I've never shoved her in a machine because I think that's really irrelevant. We've been married for more than 31 years, so I have tons of personal experience that shows that she's trustworthy. Now, could she be cheating on me? Maybe. Although I don't really know when she'd ever have the time any more than I do. I mean, she's at work and then she's home. I'm at work and then I'm home. We don't really go anywhere except with each other. So I'm not really sure how that would actually work.
And if you tried to scientifically prove it, she'd probably get very mad at you because it would mean you didn't trust her.
I don't, because I don't care. Even if she didn't biologically love me, she still acts in a way consistent with a loving relationship, which is all I personally need. Like I said, 31 years and still going strong. I'm not sure what else I need but that.
Evolution proves God didn't create the world.
It proves nothing whatsoever of the sort. In fact, theistic evolution could absolutely be a thing, although we have no evidence for the theistic part of that whatsoever. This is yet another one of those things that I've never seen an atheist say, although I guess I could imagine that it might come from somebody who isn't all that well versed in reality but is also an atheist, so I guess I'll kind of give it to him as a freebie, even though I don't think his response is going to be worthwhile, but let's see.
Well, not necessarily. God often works through natural processes in the Bible, and for all of church history, there have been prominent Christian theologians who have had a more metaphorical interpretation of Genesis, even well over 1,000 years before Darwin existed.
Some of that I'll agree with, since seeing God as metaphorical has certainly been done, but then there's the whole, well, God just works through natural processes, which is not demonstrable at all. It's just a bald assertion. Even if it says so in the Bible, that doesn't make the Bible true. My book says a thing means absolutely nothing. Now, this is a problem that we're going to have with the religious because they aren't interested in the actual demonstrable, verifiable, evidence-based truth. They just want to feel good about the things that they believe on faith. That's not ever going to be good enough for people who are rational, nor should it be. So this whole question is a complete wash, since the atheist straw man is just that, a straw man, and Zoomer is just spouting blind faith and wishful thinking. It all just comes off as a giant meh.
Christianity only spread because of military conquest.
I wouldn't say only. I mean, largely, yes. Only, no. It spread, at least at the beginning, because the Roman Empire made it not only legal but mandatory, and then they carried Christianity along with them on their military conquests. Christianity has also spread, and still spreads to this day, through unjustified implied threats. Say, that's a nice soul you've got there. It would be a real shame if anything happened to it, or by withholding actual aid until the poor and destitute professed at least a claim of Christian beliefs, because, these people are just dicks. You are not helping if you are not helping. And if you're only doing it so you get a chemical buzz in your brain from forcing your beliefs on others, you are not helping at all.
Well, eventually they did do military conquest, but for the first 300 years of Christianity, it was illegal, and it took over the Roman Empire despite that because of how popular it became.
Not really. I mean, Christianity really only became popular once it was legalized by Constantine, and by some accounts, he only did that because his wife and mother converted and pressured him into it. Constantine himself didn't even become baptized until just before he died. Thereafter, it was pushed heavily by the sword and by the missionaries that followed the armies around because they knew that the newly conquered people, they'd be easy pickings. That's how Christianity has spread, by picking on the people who have little choice but to buy into it or else.
Constantine invented what we now know of as Christianity. Again, Reddit atheist level myth. Atheists can do better than that. Listen to an actual scholar.
Which you do not present. Now, I don't think that Constantine inventing Christianity in and of itself is all that justifiable. The actual creator of Christianity was probably Paul, who never demonstrably saw anything or was exposed to anything. He just had a drug trip on the road to Damascus and started talking about it. That said, though, I get it that he's got his 10-minute format and therefore he can't really go into too much detail, but he's not really going into any detail at all, is he? He couldn't provide a citation or anything, maybe something down in the description, anything, because this really comes off as a nuh-uh, and then moving on before anybody can ask any decent questions.
If Christianity is true, why are there so many denominations of it?
That's a good question. As we know, there are more than 45,000 distinct sects of Christianity, probably more. Wouldn't you think that if there was a real God out there somewhere, that they'd make sure that their supposed word was transmitted in such a way that people could actually understand what they meant? I mean, if I can come up with something like that, then surely a God could, right? Then again, the Christian deity, he's not all that bright as described in the Bible, or even clearly demonstrably real, so I guess, what do you expect? So, Zoomer, what's your take? Something stupid like people just want to sin? I don't know, let's see.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of denominations, but the things they agree on are a lot more significant than the things they disagree on.
Not necessarily. Some of them can't even agree on the basic definition of a god, or what books belong in the Bible, or if Jesus was even God. Christians spend a lot of time playing No True Christian, don't they? True story here, but my best friend back in the late 50s, early 60s, his parents came across the country from West Virginia on a mission trip, and his mother honestly believed that the only reason that the Pope wore a big hat was to hide his horns. There's a huge number of people out there who honestly believe that Catholics aren't Christian, and I've talked to plenty of Catholics who think that Protestants can't be Christians. So this is all just nonsense. Moving on.
There's no evidence for Jesus outside the Bible.
That's true. No demonstrable evidence anyhow. Now, I'm sure he's going to give names like Tacitus or Josephus or whatever, who were just writing about things that they heard from Christians, which isn't evidence for Christianity in and of itself. But I'd love to see any Christian actually produce demonstrable evidence of anything that didn't go back to the silly fairy tales in their big book of multiple choice. Will we ever get any of that here? I wouldn't be holding my breath.
Well, that's not true. There's the ancient Jewish historian Josephus who wrote about Jesus, and he's one of the reasons why even secular scholars know Jesus historically existed.
Wrong. Told ya. Nobody outside of fundamentalist nutballs thinks that it was anything but an early Christian forgery. Even New Testament scholars, even Christian New Testament scholars don't think that. Josephus didn't write it. Josephus, a lifelong Jew, would never write, "He is the Christ." The entire passage is written in a different voice than anything else that Josephus wrote before or after. And if you simply remove it completely, the entire thing flows. So this is just nonsense, and anyone who's ever done any kind of scholarly research, they would know that. And that says nothing good about Zoomer, does it? Nothing good at all.
You really think God made billions of galaxies with billions of stars in each of them just to have a personal relationship with you?
Good question. What a complete waste, especially if there is no other life out there. Why in the world would anybody with half a brain do that? Where is your rational explanation other than, "It's a mystery," which seems to be really common among the religious? Now, I'm not saying that it couldn't have happened, but it makes no logical sense, and without a better explanation than "because I say so," or "because I believe it," or "because I have faith," I don't buy it. So, yeah, go ahead. Justify this one for us. Good luck.
Yes.
Well, that was a stupid answer. After that, he just has a picture on screen and some singing, but that's not worthwhile, and trust me, this has gone on long enough, so we're just going to skip it. This really wasn't a worthwhile anything. It was just a bunch of excuses for why he really wants to believe, not any evidence-based explanations or answers for anything, especially not things that atheists actually say. Now, granted, I'm not all that impressed with his questions at all. I don't think he culled those from any actual atheists. I'm sure he just got them from some religious website somewhere or some video he saw on YouTube, and he just put his own spin on them. So I'm not really sure what the real point of this was. It was just laughable, and that's not a big surprise. His format is also a bit of a problem because it stops him from providing any detailed answers to anything, although, as I said before, he could certainly post links down in his description, but he doesn't bother to do that. And I'm sure that works in his favor because he has no detailed answers. He knows that his intended audience doesn't care, and he's not making this video for the non-religious to begin with. It just took a very, very long time to dig through all the quickfire nonsense, and in the end, I don't know if any of it was really worth it. It'll make the SUPERCUT fans happy down the road someday, but otherwise, how much value did we get out of this? I don't know. You tell me. Anyway, what did you think? Did Redeemed Zoomer say anything at all of substance? Anywhere in his video? Or not? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Personally, mark me as not at all impressed, but I'm not really impressed by anything the religious have to say or do, because they're not really saying or doing anything for us, are they? They're just saying it to each other because they know that the religious aren't going to ask any of the difficult questions that need to be asked. They just really want to believe, but really wanting to believe, that's just dumb. Can we please try for a little less dumb, please? Just a little. I'm not asking for much. I wouldn't be holding my breath on that, but it's a nice thought nonetheless, isn't it?